was aware of. Said that they mostly work with the county, with counties, because I'm not very familiar. I'm not getting recommendations from them. Yarrow Brown is who we hear from all the time.
Yeah. Conversation for another day.
Anyway, I thought that was very interesting, and it came from, I think it was Art Kruger who had the information about the stormwater and the wastewater.
Oh,
That would make sense.
wonderful. Well, I have a very brief planning commission update to deliver at the end of the meeting. Maybe a first in a long time report. We'll see what happens.
We'll get started in about a minute here. I'm going to call the session, this regular City Commission meeting of Tuesday, January 21st. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As always, we begin our meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land through the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting the land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. Benjamin, I'll hand it over to you for roll call.
Yes, good evening, Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Shaw.
Here.
Commissioner Stanley.
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell.
Here.
Commissioner Werner.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson.
Here.
And Mayor Shamrow.
Here. All right, we're going to start today with a proclamation recognizing yesterday as Martin Luther King Jr. Day in Traverse City. I was honored to be asked to read this proclamation yesterday at the Building Bridges with Music program at the Opera House last night. They informed me and reminded me that that was the 21st annual that they have hosted here in the community. So it was a very nice organizational group to be part of. It was a very well-attended concert on a very, very cold Monday night in the city, and it was nice to see our community come out in support of musicians both from NMC and from afar, and to celebrate the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. So with that, I'll read the City of Traverse City proclamation celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day, January 20th, 2025. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered a memorable speech during the August 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, including this analogy. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. The City of Traverse City recognizes this promise, and we vow to uphold that commitment as we support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Michigan. We honor Dr. King's leadership in the civil rights movement and his efforts to promote equality, justice, and nonviolent resistance. We celebrate him for his role in challenging racial segregation and discrimination, and for inspiring a broader movement toward the transformation of society's cultural norms. His legacy continues to resonate as a symbol of ongoing struggle for the civil rights movement and social justice. It is for these reasons that I, Amy Shamrow, Mayor of the City of Traverse City, Michigan, respectfully proclaim the importance of remembering Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as we celebrate his birthday and his life on this third Monday of January. I encourage all citizens to reflect on how we can work harder to make good on that promissory note signed by our nation's founders, and to fully realize the dream that Dr. King so eloquently shared with us more than 50 years ago. Thank you for allowing me to read that. No one here to receive it, as usually happens with a proclamation, but I think we all as a community can come together on the thoughts here today, and take a moment still, even though the day was yesterday, to reflect on it as we move into this entire month. With that, I will go to announcements from the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Shamrow. Yes, I do have a few announcements. I have been asked, given the recent cold temperatures, is there still room at Safe Harbor for our homeless population? And so I did contact the chair of Safe Harbor, who confirmed that there are beds still available. They have not reached capacity yet this season. They have been hovering in the mid-60s to high 60s, and they have a capacity for 75. So we still encourage those who are experiencing homelessness and those providers, so that you know that there is still room there. We remain committed to collaborating with our partners to ensure public safety, and particularly during these cold winter months. I do want to say thank you to the community members and the commissioners and the staff who participated in the Strategic Action Planning Roundtable session this afternoon, and we also want to extend our gratitude to West Shore Bank for generously allowing us to use their community space on the third floor, which is beautiful. We hope we left it cleaner than the way we got it, and it worked out great for the exercise. Later on the agenda this evening, you will hear an update on the Strategic Planning Action process from David Burrell with Future IQ. I do want to remind the public that we currently have a survey that is active. We encourage you all to take it, and that will be available until February 14th. And finally, for our city commissioners, all of you have in front of you the Jacobs 2023-24 annual report that outlines the highlights and accomplishments of the past year at the wastewater treatment plant. This document may be accessed online on our website at the wastewater treatment plant page. And those are my updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Announcements from the city clerk.
Yes, some meetings to announce for this week, the week of January 20th, 2025. The Housing Commission is going to meet on Wednesday, January 22nd. That'll be at noon in the training room, which is on the second floor of the Governmental Center. The City Commission Ad Hoc Committee for the Brown Bridge Trust Fund will meet on Wednesday, January 22nd at 1:30 p.m. in the second floor conference room of the Governmental Center. The Planning Commission study session will be on Wednesday, January 22nd at 6 p.m. in this room, the Commission chambers on the second floor of the Governmental Center. And the Historic Districts Commission is meeting on Thursday, January 23rd at noon in the Commission chambers on the second floor of the Governmental Center. We're recruiting for a number of boards and committees that help make city government work. So anyone interested in volunteering, please know we've got opportunities on the Board of Tax Review, Brown Bridge Advisory Committee, Grand Traverse Commons Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, Housing Commission, Human Rights Commission, and Local Officers Compensation Commission. Anyone interested in those seats or maybe interested in serving in any capacity, I encourage to contact the city clerk's office. And then just 2 community updates, of course. As we're in the thick of winter, we want to remind residents and business owners to please keep their sidewalks clear of snow and ice, and also make sure, if you can, that fire hydrants are kept clear too, because when moments are really precious, that type of work really helps. And then on the theme of ice and snow, our skating rinks have opened up, and those are at F&M Park and on 14th Street by Thurlby Field. That's all that I've got.
Excellent. And sorry if I missed it, we also have the first round of Human Rights Commission and ad hoc interviews on Wednesday, don't we? Or Thursday, sorry.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. And I say that because there's another round still if people are still interested in applying. So please bear that in mind. All right. I will continue with you, Benjamin, for the consent calendar, please.
Yes, the purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public can ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed from it and placed elsewhere on the agenda for individual consideration by the commission, and such requests are automatically respected. If an item isn't removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single commission action adopting the consent calendar. Item 1, consideration of approving the minutes of the January 6, 2025 and January 13, 2025 meetings of the City Commission. Approval recommended. Item 2, consideration of adopting a resolution recommending approval of the issuance of a new redevelopment district license with Class C privileges for Infront Hospitality LLC for it to operate the license at 115 East Front Street with additional catering, Sunday sales, AM/PM, and outdoor service area permits for that location, along with the permits for a banquet facility located at 148 East 8th Street, which is the Old Town Playhouse. Adoption and approval recommended. Item 3, consideration of authorizing a 3-year agreement for professional auditing services. Approval recommended. Item 4, consideration of authorizing an amendment to the agreement for cleaning services to add the Senior Center building, Hardy parking structure, hallway, public restrooms, and office employee restroom, and to seasonally suspend cleaning services at the Old Town parking structure. Approval recommended. And finally, item 5, consideration of adopting to make permanent a traffic control order which provides for 2-hour parking on 2nd Street between Cedar Street and Vine Street. Approval recommended.
Thank you. Would any commissioner like any of the items from the consent calendar removed? Seeing none. Would anyone from the audience or the gallery, whatever we're calling it today, like to see any item removed? Well, here we go. Seeing none, I will take a motion for the consent calendar.
I move that the consent calendar be adopted as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Support from Shaw. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I was going to say, watch it there. All right, so moving on then, we can move on to our old business now and start with a strategic action planning update from Future IQ.
Thank you, Mayor Shamrow. I'd like to introduce David Burrell, who was with us today for 2 hours at West Shore Bank. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And he has some slides to share. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the invitation here. I wanted to just give you a bit of an update on the process, and I've got a few slides to show you in terms of some of the data where we're at. If you like data, I think we've got really nice data, right? So I think we've got a really good story emerging in the engagement so far, and I want to give you a bit of an update of what happened today. So just a quick overview. So we launched this sort of back in, I guess, September was when we really started talking about this project. We held the think tank workshops in early October. We then followed that up with a series of open community visioning workshops. So we invited people to come and we shared with them the outcomes from the think tank process. Got them to weigh in on that and provide their sort of thoughts. We had about close to 200 people came to those open sessions, and we held them in locations around the city, the library and the ski hill and so on. Really good discussions, actually. Then through December, we wrote up the results from that. We analysed the data. We produced the think tank report, published that very early January. We launched the survey, the community survey, which is also probing some of the material out of the think tank. That was launched last week. And then this week, we held the roundtable session looking at what we call these strategic pillars. So what we've been working on up until now is really about where does the community want to go in the future? You know, what's that sort of trajectory or that vision for the future? I think we're getting a really good answer on what that is, which I want to share with you. And what we're now starting to pivot to is, well, how do we get there? So today was the start of that process of exploring what are the actions we need to build into the strategic plan that will start to move Traverse City, you know, start to pivot into the direction of the preferred future. So I'm going to just skip through some slides here. This was the deck we used today, so it's got more in it that we need to cover right now. I think you're familiar mostly with the outcomes from the think tank, but I want to just settle on this diagram for a moment, right? You've probably seen this. So what we've been developing is what we call different versions of the future or different scenarios of the future for what Traverse City could look like under different conditions. And this was all a framework that was built up through the think tank workshop. So this is our methodology, but the content was very much driven by people in the community. What it came down to in the think tank was that there was two macro themes that people saw having the greatest impact on the future direction and outcome of the community. And one was around what we broadly called the community evolution. And that's got a whole bunch of sort of factors in it, but this whole issue of that the community's changing. You know, you've got, you know, a certain percent of the population, I guess absentee residents in some ways. You've got the potential for other people to come here. You've got affordability issues. You've got market forces at play in different ways. You've got kind of homeless issues. You've got all these things going on. The question is, well, which way does it go over the next 5 or 10 years? Okay, and there is a chance to be architects of that future. That's what we're sort of teasing out here. So there's that whole community evolution theme. That's the horizontal axis. The vertical axis is the other big theme, which was around what we call the development trajectory. And this was a range of issues that are sort of all about, I guess, the rate of development, the type of development, what it looks like, the impact on neighbourhoods, the impact on the commercial areas, you know, traffic, all those things. So sort of think of that as a lot of infrastructure components. And in this matrix, we were sort of playing out, well, what do you do about those big forces of change? Some of which you can kind of control quite easily. Some are, are big forces that are new to a place like Traverse City. So each of those axes has sort of got a, well, let's just let it go. Market forces dictate, or what if we intervene and have a more proactive approach? So that's the sort of structure of those axes. And we developed out these 4 different scenarios, which I won't go into in detail. But we asked people using that framework, and there's a grid in the background there that's a 10 by 10 grid. We asked people to think about what reflected the least desired future, so the one they didn't want to have happen, the expected future, so where did they think the community was heading and would end up if we don't do anything different, and what's the preferred future. And we used this sort of a framework for that. We did this in the think tank and in all those community visioning sessions. This data, I just love this data, right? I just think it's fantastic for this community, right? So the one on the left, the red bubbles, is the response to the question is what's the least desired future? And the larger the bubble, the more people pick that location, right? So the very lower left of that matrix is kind of as much as hands-off as you can get, right? We're going to just let market forces kind of really run the development show. We're not going to sort of do too much about the community. I mean, it may change, and if it changes, so be it, right? That was a future that people clearly did not want. You can see the concentration of responses in that very lower left. And I should say there's nearly 200 responses in this data set. So this is people from the think tank, those open community visioning sessions, I think it was a really good cross-section of people from neighbourhoods and different kind of walks of life. The one on the right, the green one, is what was the expected future. So where do people think we're going to end up if we just keep doing what we're doing? You can see there's a little dotted line slightly off the centre there. That's the median response. So that's plotted as the median response in both cases. And you can see that the median response there, or where that locates, is that we're sort of still just in that scenario that people really didn't want the future to be in, right? That's where people think we're going towards. That's also starting to get reflected in the community survey that's running at the moment. The biggest concern on people's mind is the future direction of the community. There's a lot of things they love about it. They love living here. There's all sorts of good stuff, but their concern level is the future direction. That reflects this data, I think. But of course, the good stuff is, well, what's the preferred future? And again, this is the data from all those sessions. And you can see it's in the very upper right there. And it's really interesting because it's very concentrated. So there are a few outliers, but almost everybody's in 3 of those bubbles. That's a very high concentration of responses. It's also quite ambitious. So you can see that it's like very orientated to the very upper right corner. And that is what I would call a big appetite for change. So you're sort of almost on the edge of leaning into the intervention as much as possible. So taking that kind of regional approach and thinking about really managing our community evolution and really working on proactive design, really managing the physical landscape in the community. So that was really good data, right? And we are asking similar questions to validate this in the survey. Without getting too far ahead of it, the survey, because it's quite early in the days there, it's reflecting very similar sort of results at this stage, right? So we feel pretty confident that we're getting a pretty good answer about where people want to go. For the Commission and the Commissioners, I think what that means is people are going to be looking for a more proactive direction of the future of the community. I think people are going to be looking for this strategic plan to be really laying out a roadmap for the future, and that the community is going to have tools to be much more interventionist and proactive in guiding that future, making that happen. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but I think that's what the community is going to come to you with, right? So if I put all those 3 together, you can see that sort of, you should get that really nice sort of step there between the least desired, what we don't want is that lower left. Where we think we're going is somewhere not too far off that, but where we really want to be is up there in that right-hand corner. Of course, then the challenge is how do we get there, right? And that's what we've started to work on. There's details about the scenarios in the report. We did ask a couple of questions in those community visioning sessions. I thought this data would be good to share with you. Actually, the request of one of the commissioners, we included a question about values in that. So we asked about what values and attributes should Traverse City retain. You can see some really strong responses there around environmental focus, small town charm, thoughtful development. These were open-ended responses, so we've categorised those, and that's the sort of categorisation aggregation that came up. This data is on the project portal, and you're able to search it by keywords and look at what everybody said. So all the open data's there at the moment. And then we asked people to describe their preferred vision in a sort of a narrative, so rather than just pick a point on a chart, actually describe it to us. People wrote a lot, right? So people were very willing to weigh in and have their say, which is great. You can see big topics here around thoughtful and sensitive development, a regional focus, and that really is about a regional leadership role for Traverse City in the region to help guide the direction, but inclusive and equitable, and then sort of engaged leadership and engaged communities in quality housing, other things. But very consistent set of messages coming through from the think tank, the data in that, and some of these open-ended responses. I think it's giving us a very clear picture of what people are looking for.
Can I ask on the last slide,
Of course.
what your you said you put ones under these headings based on responses. How are you defining small town charm? Because I've heard that used in our own community for everything from don't change anything, we like everything the way it is, to that's a thriving downtown that people can walk to. So kind of how are you defining what went into that bucket?
Yeah, we try not to stray too far from what people say. So those categories are actually sort of built up as we go through the categorization. So we kind of get a feel for the language people are using.
So people use small-town charm
Probably,
specifically?
probably in
Okay.
most cases, they would have said something like small town charm or
Okay.
some iteration of that, right? The one that's thoughtful development would be a different set. It might be kind of more complaining about developments they don't like, right? So we sort of put that into a category called thoughtful development, right? But so we do take a bit of license to categorise that, but
Okay.
but you can see all the raw data on the project portal
Great.
as well. And you could go in there, for example, and do a key search on small town, and you'll see all the responses and the full text that goes around each one.
Fantastic, thank you, I
Of
appreciate
course.
that.
And that's one of the commitments in this too, I should say, is that to have a very open and transparent process. I mean, the intention was to have this be very community-driven, and that we open it up so everybody can see the data and they can see the logic of how their input at each point shapes the sort of strategy and the development at the following step. I think that's really important in communities today, and it was certainly part of the brief that was given to us by your staff leadership. This is just a little bit of preliminary data from the current community survey. I don't put too much on this because it's only 150 responses, but you can see that they're basically in the same spot, and that breakdown is actually by which neighbourhood people live in, and then there is a portion of people who live outside the city limits who have also been participating in the survey as well. But you can filter those out and look at it in different ways. All good stuff, right? That leads us to today, right? And what we worked on today was this, what we call strategic pillar framework. So I think for you as commissioners, this is going to start to get closer to what does this mean to your program operations and what your staff and what your city does. Looking at all the work so far, these were the 7 areas that sort of came out that seemed to have sort of substance. They were identified in the think tank and or came through strongly in the workshops and are starting to show up in the survey. So if I can just run through each one of these. Starting at sort of 1 o'clock, I'll just run around. So proactively managing the urban design. This is really a big picture one, context about how do you manage growth and your city, and how do you sort of deal with this when you're the concentration of so many people who come here to work and so many visitors to come here. People are concerned about that. So I think what this kind of pillar and this line of thought is going to be about is, well, how do you manage that over time? Because there is a finite point at which the system breaks, right? You can't just keep packing people in or adding traffic, right? So this is a chance, I think, to have a really big picture look at it and think about that kind of urban design component so that you don't lose character and you don't lose community feel, because this is a place where a lot of people live. The next one around, strengthen placemaking and neighbourhood character. We had some debate today about whether those first and second ones are not the same one or they don't collapse together. We did decide to keep them separate and see whether, as we get in the focus groups, there'll be enough substance there to have them as separate topic areas. People did describe them. I think Heather described them maybe as, one is like the commercial space, one's the residential space. Other people looked at it as one is maybe the overarching big picture and one is really kind of getting down into the neighbourhoods. But that placemaking and neighbourhood character, I think, is going to really resonate with a lot of the residents, because certainly talking to people at the community visioning sessions, people have a high connection and growing connection, I think, to their neighbourhood, and that placemaking is a really strong tool in that community evolution component. Next one around, I think very relevant to your role as commissioners, fostering a regional collaborative approach. And this is sort of obvious that there are a lot of big issues where you really need to now start thinking about the whole county or a multi-county area, think about resources, transportation, healthcare, all those type of things, and water management and so on. But it's also about being able to exert influence and heft. So to be able to have a big enough voice that you can go to state and national sort of forms of government and be able to put forward your case and talk about things that are important to you. Interestingly enough, in this one, both today and in the think tank, I asked the question, what's the role of Traverse City? And without skipping a beat, people said, Traverse City needs to lead some of this. So there is a view that the regional approach is really important, but a recognition perhaps that as a set of commissioners and staff, you're probably going to have to do some work to convene that and build those relationships. Then keep going around, creating community engagement participation. This was just, I think, going to be one that will probably wash across all the other pillars that may even drop out. We didn't get anybody taking that up today. Building socioeconomic systems and amenities. So that's really about how do you create that balanced community. So think of it as housing, think of it as the sort of services, you know, how do you make sure you just don't end up being an enclave for rich retirees from California or something, right? But that you're actually a working, functioning community where locals have their place. Supporting environmental sustainability, that's a very strong value, so that's obviously there as a pillar. And then building a thriving year-round economy. This notion of part of your resilience strategy is about sort of building that deeper year-round economy, which may be tourism, and it may be tourism and other things as well, but has components of innovation in it. So we're at this point. We worked on these today. We had some really great discussions, really started to frame up what we saw as the purpose of each one of these focus areas or pillars, and then starting to brainstorm what some actions could be. So over the next couple of months, we're going to be building out these in more detail. And the next steps will be the community survey is going to run through till the 14th of February. We're going to start to really push that in the next couple of weeks. We've got a mailer going out to every household. We'll put those results up when they come in. We've got strategic pillar focus groups on the 18th, 19th and 20th. So these are going to be taking each one of those and a more dedicated time to dig into the topic and build it out. We'll have a survey to prioritise on those, moving towards developing the plan. And to be confirmed, but an idea of a future summit in May where we'll be able to share the plan and the outcome back with the community, get any final input, and obviously a chance to share it with you as well. So that's where we're at. Just my take on it. I think we've reached a point where what's emerging quite clearly is the appetite the community has and where it wants to go. Sometimes communities have different views. You know, I've worked in communities where there might be two quite different aspirations for the future. That gets a little tricky, right? Here, I think there's a very common view about where people see the community wants to go and the sort of process to get there. And now I think we're starting to build out some detail about that roadmap. So that's where we're at.
Do you have any more questions from any of the commissioners up here? Lots of great data coming in, which we love to see. So great. We look forward to, first of all, getting everybody who might be watching or in the audience who hasn't done any of these interactions yet to doing the community survey. Then is that on the website, Benjamin? And if so, where can we find it?
You can go to the city's website, click on projects, and then strategic plan.
Okay,
There's a whole
great.
page there all about the strategic plan as well as links to the survey.
Great, thank you for that. And of course, we've got more dates coming up in February, it looks like, so we hope many of you can join us for some of those conversations.
And if I could add one thing too, is that for people who take the survey or sign up on the project portal to follow the project, we are starting a process of newsletters that go out, and they'll probably go out every couple of weeks, where we'll update people on what's happening, what the data we're finding. So we want to have this be very much a way that people can stay in touch, particularly for people who may not be here all the time. You know, people sometimes go south here, I know that, right? But this is a way that people can participate and stay in touch with the project through the course of between now and May. So,
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Okay, that doesn't have we don't have a motion with this, so we don't usually open it to public comment. There are a few people here though, and while we do have a captive audience for another couple of minutes, did anybody want to make public comment on this? Again, there will be more opportunities in the future to actually participate, but if anybody had anything they wanted to share right now. All right, seeing none, thank you very much for that, and we'll move on to old business number 2, which is our CDBG funding conversation. I'll hand that over to Liz.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Shamro. Yep, this is being brought back before you. We discussed it at a previous meeting, and some commissioners had questions. So over the last 2 weeks, we've been fielding those questions to resolve any outstanding issues. We have Leslie Stickerman from the Planning Department here. I do want to remind commissioners that when roughly this time last year, this was a top priority to get this through to the finish line. on a very tight, I think my exact words were tight but doable. So we are at that stage where we are ready to issue the first fundings in the 5-year plan. And we've learned a lot as a team as we've gone through this, and Leslie has become our resident expert. It is a very prescriptive federal program with lots of very specific rules on different pots of categories of how the money can be spent. And so I just wanted to remind you that we are here. We've put out an RFP this late fall on, again, a very tight deadline, but we got it through. And so Leslie's here to continue to answer questions about CDBG funding, any more outlying questions that the commissioners may have.
Well, I will just ask then, I know that one of the reasons why we moved this was questions about, about salaries or helping to pay for services that might not actually be needed until the next fiscal year, and some other things that were raised. Could you just address, because this was a public conversation, where some shifts might have happened since our last conversation?
So the questions about staffing that was for Central United Methodist Church, there was a miscommunication, misunderstanding on my part. They had originally asked to spread the staffing costs over 2 program years. Then when they realized what the situation was, what the question was, then they clarified that actually they can use all of those funds in this program year. We're limited to roughly $54,000 in what we can spend for staffing for this, based on a percentage of the overall allotment, and they're asking for pretty much all of that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Other questions or a motion? Okay, I think I saw Tim's up, and then Heather, and then Jackie.
Can you say a few words about the SLUP requirements for paved parking, like how many parking spaces are currently required, what do they have, as Safe Harbor works to apply for a new SLUP, what's the outlook for additional parking required? I voiced this 2 weeks ago, but I find it hard to spend upward of $100,000 to pave some parking that hopefully in the future won't even be there.
As you know, there's an expectation that Safe Harbor will be coming back to the city and asking for an amendment to their special land use permit, their SLUP, to allow them to go full year-round and expand capacity to the extent that they can. They've indicated that the overflow parking is in use, and that overflow parking is unpaved. That doesn't currently meet the city's requirements for paved parking. It also potentially poses an environmental risk because stormwater isn't being contained per the stormwater ordinance. When they come back with that SLUP, likely they will need more parking, and that number is as determined by the planning director, and that becomes a finite number that is then required under the conditions of the SLUP. And so they will be required to have a certain number of spaces at that time, and it's not something that can be varied or changed. And as their programming changes and the use of the property changes, they've found that they needed more parking. And I'm putting my planner hat on, taking my CDBG hat off. I've always been a proponent of using parking or requiring parking that's actually being used. So if they need that amount of parking, most people aren't going to put in more parking than they need. It's being used right now, and city requirements are that it be paved.
And City Manager Vogel wanted to speak to this too.
Yes, I did speak with Patrick Livingston, the chair of Safe Harbor, And yes, parking is required under the SLUP, and they consider this as a part of their operational needs. They have over 2,000 volunteers. And so this is a part of their operations, and that's why they made this request. And then if there's any other questions about the process or the requirements, I'm prepared to answer those with some comments from our city attorney.
Tim, this is,
Well, could I follow up on that then? Like,
Slot
what would be
question.
the process for this body to not require it to be paved parking at the very least? Like, allow for some portion to be a gravel parking lot. We had our city engineer department in front of us last week, I think it was, saying that paved parking, this was paved street versus asphalt street. You know, they're both impervious surfaces. So we as humans have a perception that, oh, they're so much different, but as far as the environment's concerned, they're pretty much the same.
So the city commission may enact an amendment to the zoning ordinance regarding parking requirements if you wished to do so, to not have a parking requirement. That zoning amendment would need to follow the proper legal process, which would take approximately 3 months to go into effect. A 3-month delay would likely seriously jeopardize Safe Harbor's ability to transition to a year-round shelter by May. Approving a SLUP that does not meet all the enacted ordinance standards provides ground for litigation, and I did confirm that with our city attorney, that in particular she concurs that parking is required under the SLUP ordinance, and it could be amended under the requirements of the MZEA. If any of the requirements under the SLUP ordinance are not supported by competent material evidence in the record, the decision regarding the SLUP could be challenged and overturned by the circuit court.
Mitch, Mitch, is your question on this topic? 'Cause I
Yes.
have- Okay, please, and then I'll get to Heather.
This is probably for Sean more than you, but could you elaborate as far as the specifics of how much parking is required and what provisions under the SLUP and zoning code require X number of parking spaces?
So again, it's my understanding that it's not, for instance, one parking spot per 3 beds or some kind of ratio like that. It's as determined by the planning director based on the operations and the needs. So it is a finite number that would be in the conditions of the SLUP, but it's
you
not a
can't say
number
what that
that
number is.
necessarily is known at this time without a lot more information from the applicant.
Okay. Heather?
Well, it says right here on page 72, which is Wayne Sterenberg, he's the treasurer of Safe Harbor, listing the reasons why it needs to be paved. Number 2 says parking capacity is adequate. And Leslie has now said twice that the determination of the amount of parking that's needed at Safe Harbor is made by the planning director. So why do we need to pave anything?
Well, we have to by the SLUP, it says, correct?
But if the planning director says the parking is adequate, if Safe Harbor says parking is adequate, why do we need to
So
pave anything?
the planning director
amend the
hasn't
SLUP
met with Safe
process
Harbor
first.
on their new, because they haven't applied for their amended SLUP. So the planning director doesn't have enough information and hasn't met with Safe Harbor to make that determination.
Well, I have further comments.
Yes, and you're next on the list, so go right ahead.
Okay. I really wish the funding for Safe Harbor could go to staffing, and I'm sorry that it can't. I do appreciate the clarification on why Safe Harbor wants this paving done, and that's, again, on page 72, it's number 3, that they have to have, it's mandatory parking must be paved, whatever that means, to get the SLUP. And number 5 is that future shelter expansion possibilities that they need the parking for future shelter expansion possibilities. But I don't support the expansion of Safe Harbor in this location as a daytime-only shelter. And I can't support the fund allocation that supports the possibility of an expansion. I really wish these funds could be allocated towards a new location for Safe Harbor. And I'm not speaking as a single commissioner, I am speaking as a single commissioner, but I'm not speaking as a single resident of Traverse City. There are many, many, many residents out there and businesses who do not support a daytime-only shelter in this location, which is basically downtown. You know, the county commission tomorrow is considering a funding request from Safe Harbor for $1.1 million to operational expenses. Their petition, or whatever you would call it, it doesn't say if it's just for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, lots of misspellings, all sorts of things, so I can't tell exactly what's going on. But, and it's possible that the townships around us would prefer that a daytime-only homeless shelter remains in downtown Traverse City rather than going someplace else. But I can't, as an elected official, my constituents don't want this here. That space may be ideal for housing, some supportive housing, some workforce housing, but it is not ideal as the region's only shelter, and certainly not as the region's only daytime shelter. So I'm not gonna support this.
Commissioner Shaw, you keep saying daytime shelter, but it is a nighttime only shelter.
I'm
Sorry, just wanted to clarify that for the public.
Yes.
And then also, you know, I appreciate what you're saying about that not being the location. However, as this is our community funding from the federal government, we cannot spend it anywhere outside the city limits. So that's been,
Okay, but
that
there-
was determined by the attorney last meeting.
There may be other places where this $100,000 can go, that's, you know, pattern books for ADUs. I mean, there's lots of housing opportunities in that big CDBG list that's not just paving a parking lot, that, for something that I hope is going to move someplace else.
Thank you.
Where there will be not only daytime and nighttime shelter, but there will be supportive, room for supportive assistance within that building.
Thank you. Commissioner Anderson, you have been waiting patiently. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Leslie, I had just a clarifying question about the location of the lot to be paved. Am I understanding correctly that Safe Harbor is actually made up of two parcels? One that was sort of secondarily granted to Safe Harbor for future use for construction of affordable housing of some kind, and is the paved parking lot we're talking about physically located on that parcel, or where? Orient me, please.
I have not seen the plans. It's my understanding that it's the area just east of the building where they're currently parking, and not on the separate parcel. But that's my understanding.
Okay.
Well, I can, as somebody who lives a block away and sees that parking lot quite frequently, that tends to be where it does park. Occasionally, parking does overlap onto the other parcel. That is the people who are parking in surplus spaces, though, usually when I've seen it. And often it's filled with snow and other things, though. So I would say that the area is, and as someone who was involved in the original SLUP process for this, as I'm recalling the property lines, et cetera, it's all on that east side closest on the parcel that does currently house the Safe Harbor.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Mitch has the photo.
Oh, Mitch has got it. There we go.
Yes, and sorry that I can't put this on the screen, but I just pulled it up on my tablet here, and it does appear that there is more than twice the acreage of their current parking lot to the east of the building before you hit the next property line.
Property.
Thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you for that official,
Thank you.
Mitch. Commissioner Stanley.
So I appreciate that the city attorney shared her comments about modifying the SLUP requirements. We know our city attorney tends to be conservative about timelines, and she's saying roughly a 3-month window. Does that process need to go through first the planning commission?
Yes, I believe so. And yeah, she was
Yes, it
concurring
is.
with the planning director about the timeline of, that it would take approximately 3 months.
And so we're currently at January 21st.
Mhm.
So we're looking at end of April-ish, mid to late April, conservatively. And Safe Harbor's close date is April 15th. And this would be a prerequisite of our ability to modify their SLUP to allow for year-round operations without modifying the current parking configuration. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So what we're saying is as of right now, if we vote no on the parking, we have to accept as a possible outcome that Safe Harbor will close for the season on April 15th, and there will not be overnight shelter available year-round in Traverse City for 2025.
I believe that, yes, that is a possibility.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
I would also just remind everybody in the context of this whole conversation that the funds that we determine for this particular group of funding have to be spent, not allocated, by June 30th. So, if this falls apart, or we don't get the support for that, that's $100,000 that we would need to either find a new source for that's been vetted, that it meets the criteria, that it doesn't with the other things we've spent, go over percentages in other ways, and get that allocated and spent by the end of the year, or find out that the SLUP process doesn't pass in April and hold the money back just in case, and then have a rushed lot. I mean, I'm framing this in that we've had this conversation for months and months and months, and I appreciate that there isn't going to be complete consensus, but the timeline is important to talk about as we're having these conversations, because it does factor into our decision matrix. Mitch, you have your hand up?
Yes, heeding that, I understand the importance of timelines, and though it could theoretically work out, I don't see us being able to confidently conclude an amendment to parking requirements through the Planning Commission before the SLUP deadlines. Would there be a possibility for us to move to advance the SLUP and the CBG funding as we're looking at it now, and then if it does manage to get through the Planning Commission to change parking requirements, to make a slight amendment to the SLUP at a later time?
I mean, if the board were to change the code, the codified ordinances at a later date, and again, I think that might be a good question for Lauren, who's not here, but I could probably get that answer for you.
Because I can see, in this case, the need to proceed in a reasonable time frame so that an applicant can move forward for something that we have a limited deadline to allocate these funds. But I see this as a good example of where we might have parking requirements that require an applicant to provide more parking than they might need to provide, or to require that parking be paved when there could be other alternatives. And even if we can't modify the city parking requirements for SLUPs before this SLUP goes into effect, it would be, I'd say, worth looking at and directing the Planning Commission to look at just going forward.
I have a question related to that, though, as well. What is, and this would be you as opposed to the legal questions, what is the time commitment of staff to taking an undertaking such as changing the SLUP process?
Well, Mayor, thank you for asking. I looked out, we had a great staff meeting this morning, and many of our department heads are here today. And as I looked at everybody as we were winding down, our team's at capacity right now. We have a lot of projects that are 50, 60, 70, 80%, and we need to get those projects through to completion. We're dealing with, major issues, and I don't know that the staff have the bandwidth to accomplish that process right now.
Do we have other questions for Leslie, or a motion, or other comments? Well, not comments, save our comments till the motion's been made.
I'll make the motion that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute contracts with Goodwill Northern Michigan, Northwest Michigan Supportive Housing, Central United Methodist Church Outreach Program, and Safe Harbor of Grand Traverse Incorporated in the not-to-exceed total of $285,512 from CDBG funds as outlined in Deputy Planning Director Slickerman's communication dated January 10th, 2025.
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Stanley and Treadwell. Okay, and then Jackie, I saw your hand go up just after the motion was made, so please go
Yes,
ahead.
and I can frame this either as an added informational question or possibly as an amendment to the motion that's before us. So tell me what's more effective
Well, let's
here.
hear it as a question, and we'll see where
My
it goes.
question is, can we separate out the parking lot at Safe Harbor from the grant for the generator backup power supply?
Yes, you can.
What would be the proposal, because we do have to get these going to do with the rest of the money?
You know, I don't have an answer for that. I'm sorry, but I do think that spending money to pave that parking lot with the understanding that this is an interim solution to a longer-term regional facility, I hesitate to see us putting valuable funds into something that's going to be a short-term, such a short-term usage. So,
I do have a question, as I haven't had an update in a while. My understanding that was that one of the properties that was being looked at outside of the city for this other plan has actually already been sold to someone else, and that there isn't currently a location. And I don't say this to say that I don't think there can be, and I don't say this to say that I don't think that the community won't be continuing to take actions and steps potentially towards other locations at all. But when we talk about things being temporary, I'm curious to, how do I put this? Is temporary 3 to 5 years? Is temporary 5 to 10 years? Because I think that makes a very big difference on how and when we spend our money. I know that Traverse Health Clinic and has a mobile service now, and other places in rural areas, as I've been involved in some of the conversations that I have been at wearing different hats, like was mentioned by Leslie, both through rural, talking about children's literacy in rural areas and health access. A lot of nonprofits are moving into mobile because they can't be everywhere all the time. We have mobile Secretary of State now too. And even though there's a Secretary of State office, they are very much trying to outreach to everyone, including those experiencing homelessness. I say this all to say that a lot that has been requested, we're talking about only through the lens of our volunteers parking there or not. And to me, it is a potential for mobile services to be offered. It's a potential for, or even if the shelter isn't open during the day, that's a central location that can be used for those things. It is a place where people could park a car that maybe aren't going to be comfortable going into a shelter themselves. And so I understand everybody's questions about this, but I'm curious when we talk about temporary what we're actually talking about, since we don't have a timeline for any other option. Not saying that there won't be, not saying that there couldn't be in 3 to 5 years, but I'm just curious where the threshold is of this portion that's going to be in paving might be considered wasteful versus an investment in something that could be very well used over the next few years, even if it does move on or move out. As a neighbor, that's my 2 cents, though. So, go ahead, Heather. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead,
well, I
Jackie.
just wanted to respond to your original question, which, in your mind, short-term could be 3 to 5 years. In my mind, it could be 2 to 3 years. So, and who knows?
Exactly. Yep.
Which
Totally
of us.
fair.
And I just want to say that as long as we keep funding and saying yes to this over and over again, nobody feels any pressure to make a change. So, we keep funding it, we keep saying, okay, another year, okay, a little bit more here, a little bit more there, and, here we are. Why would anybody need to change the location if we keep saying yes?
Commissioner Stanley?
I want to be clear that I don't think that, I wish we had a proposal that didn't involve pavement. However, currently, our SLUP process is requiring some more parking in order for us to consider the ability to keep Safe Harbor open year-round. So when I'm looking at this ask and I'm hearing resistance to it, I want to be clear that this isn't something that I wish that we had in front of us or that we needed to consider, but voting no on this is saying that we accept at least some degree of likelihood, according to our city attorney, who I have tremendous faith in her knowledge of these processes and how long they take, that Safe Harbor will not be able to be open year-round. And that was described as a goal of this body, that we would have a year-round emergency shelter. These funds are restricted to be used within the city of Traverse City, regardless of whether or not we think the city of Traverse City is the right place for a year-round overnight shelter, or whether or not we are hopeful about seeing that develop outside city limits. These funds must be spent here, and they must be spent by June 30th. We, the city of Traverse City, this body did not come up with these funding categories. These were the funding categories, these were the asks of the nonprofits who are doing the day-to-day work with our unsheltered population in our community. These are the things that they put forward in terms of their ability to do that work. And for Safe Harbor, the city has created a scenario in which they're having to ask for some of these funds for parking so that we can consider in a timely fashion before their closing date of April 15th, the ability to stay open year-round. And if we vote no on this tonight, we're saying we're okay with that, kicking that can down the road another year.
Just to really quickly clarify, because what I had said about what I've observed in the parking over there and what was quoted weren't jiving to me, so I went back. So under number 1 in Mr. Sternenberg's email says, Safe Harbor has enough parking spaces available for building occupant use. However, a portion of the parking spaces presently in use is unpaved. And so that's, we're talking, you know, that goes back to one of the issues that was raised and why it was asked for was frankly, one of the conversations that was had was the age of volunteers and the accessibility and the safety of their movements, as well as other issues. So I think at some point this shifted into, they don't even need this, why are we asking them to do it when they are using unpaved portions to park currently? And that gets into the stormwater management and things that they also mention in their email. So I just wanted to clarify that because that was in the back of my mind as a point that was made there. Yes, Heather.
Commissioner Stanley is very convincing. That's a very convincing argument. And no, I don't want to. I don't want the temporary shelter in the summer of Safe Harbor to not be able to open. But using her own words, we are kicking the can down the road here by allowing this expansion to go on and on with more and more asks when we really need another location that's larger and can accommodate those services on site that for daytime and nighttime shelter.
Commissioner Warner.
Yeah, I could be convinced for the parking, and maybe if it had some of the things that Commissioner Treadwell was after. But we're here because city staff didn't bring it to our attention when they first saw the application back whenever that was. You know, our city planning director hopefully has some, maybe not, maybe it's been quite a while since the SLUP for Safe Harbor was, you know, put through. But as far as they're asking for parking, October, whenever the application came in, when did the applications come in?
Well, the RFP wasn't even put out till November,
Okay, so.
late
whatever.
November.
But we're talking about months now, and so that's already almost 2 months ago. There was time to start to address this. And now here we are in a pinch, like we've been backed into a corner, essentially. As Commissioner Stanley said, she didn't say backed into a corner, but the clock is ticking, and that's unfortunate. And so, yes, I could be convinced on the paving, however unpleasant it is, but it's not Safe Harbor's fault if that's the requirements we have, and we didn't have the foresight to start looking into ways to change that in a timely manner. But I cannot support a generator when there's no justification here. Like, nothing says the power has, over the past 10 years, how many times has the power gone out? Zero justification for a generator. And I cannot support Goodwill's fossil fuel-based HVAC systems, Northwest Michigan Supportive Housing's fossil fuel-based boilers and hot water heating. Can't support those. Those are contrary to, it's not a secret. I've sat up here for many years talking about the climate crisis. I'm not going to support them. So like I said, if you can't manage to get the 5 votes, but it sounds like you probably will, yeah, I would support some selective things in here, but as a package, no.
I'm going to say that, Commissioner Warner, I appreciate where you come from, and it's consistent of the fossil fuel heating, but the reason why that policy, that is a city policy, failed many times before was because it did not have the exception to allow for exceptions to be made to the rule of electric heat. And the very conversations that we had, and at that time, I believe Commissioners Stanley, Treadwell, and Mayor Pro Tem Wilson were on the commission as part of those votes, was that what about things like affordable housing where it just isn't going to work in the numbers, but we need this to happen?
So I didn't even cite the policy. I'm not referencing the policy. I'm citing this is the right thing to do, is building electrification, because it is the right thing to do. And often, and I know specifically in one of these cases, it's the less expensive thing to do. They've tried, and it's not their fault. It's not, because HVAC contractors say, oh, it's too hard. It'll never work. It's too cold. I was at a site today. It was -3 degrees. It was an all-electric commercial facility, and it was fine. It works. And in one of these cases, I know very specifically, it's less expensive, both installation cost and operating cost. So it's not their fault. It's their HVAC. But unless we as a body start to say, no, this is what needs to be done, it's not going to happen.
So you're saying, Commissioner Warner, that you think that they put this proposal forward with the intention of spending more on a non-electric heating source?
That wasn't their intention, but that's the result.
I find that's interesting, considering how much time and effort I know nonprofits put into these proposals. They're not usually whipped off willy-nilly.
It's not willy-nilly, but they work with their contractors, their subcontractors, and human nature, people like to go with what they're comfortable with, what they know, what they're experienced with. And if they're not comfortable with heat pumps, they don't recommend them.
Thank you for your opinion on that. I thought I saw Jack, Mark's hand go up. Sorry if I didn't. Okay, then I guess I was trying to call on you guys for no reason. Apologies. The other thing I would say is, on a night like tonight, I don't care if a heat has never failed. I don't care if electric has never failed at Safe Harbor, or on a night when it's 90 degrees at night, that we have hospitals that have generators. This is an essential service that people can't just go to a hotel if the power does happen to go out one of those nights and it's very cold or very hot. And it's not like my house or anybody else's where maybe we can kind of layer up, or we can go to a friend's house or a family member's house. So if others want to weigh in on that, those other issues that were raised, but you've made some very interesting points, and that's appreciated, Commissioner Warner. Go ahead, Commissioner Anderson, and then, sorry.
A point of clarification, please. Point 5 in the email from Safe Harbor indicates that the added parking lot paving will take into consideration future shelter expansion possibilities. Is there any more detail about that?
I think that the reason that is detailed here is because I specifically asked them to speak to that if they've considered where they're going to pave, if that's going to impact where a building expansion may take place. And the way I understand this is that with the information that they have right now and what they know, this would not interfere with that, with any expansion. That's the way I read that.
Are there expansion plans at that location?
It was a question that I thought came up last time. about the potential for expansion. Maybe I misheard something,
Or
but
I
if
did.
there were some expansion of the building, would this interfere with that?
City Manager Vogel, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I have a few points I'd just like to make. You know, we're in our very first year as an entitlement community, and we operated under a very tight timeline the entire time. So we've all been in a pinch this entire time. We didn't mean to bring you know, the RFP went out late November. I believe we started looking at them in December. So this has all been accelerated, and we've all been learning in real time and growing. And I want to say the staff are very receptive to the comments we've received, so that in years 2 and 3 and 4, we can make course corrections. But with regarding the SLUP for Safe Harbor and the pavement, Safe Harbor is currently operating under a seasonal shelter under an existing SLUP. They are seeking a new SLUP for operating year-round, and the City Commission unanimously expressed support as part of this broader effort to address the unhoused reality of some of our residents. And so I just wanted to state that. I agree that this is our first year, and we're all growing and learning together, and we've taken the feedback that we've received, and we are ready to move into the next year, because the fiscal year ends June 25th. We don't want to be in a pinch. We don't want to feel the pressure of moving this quickly next time. And the staff are ready to move into that year 2 cycle and to take the feedback that we've learned. And the other part that I think is important, these are federal dollars, very prescriptive, as I've said. A small portion of those dollars can roll over to future funding years, but not if a number of these dollars are not able to be put to use in this fiscal year, there's a risk that we will just lose them. And again, we've really worked hard to get this first year off the ground, and we've all learned a lot about these programs and how to administer them. It's been a very heavy lift, and I'm extremely proud of the team for being able to get it done in such a short amount of time. And there's room to grow and there's room to improve. And we are committed to taking these levels of feedback and moving them into the future years as we learn and grow together. So thank you.
Go ahead, Jackie.
I just wondered, how high is the risk of losing as opposed to rolling over some dollars?
Would you be able to speak to the percentage that can roll over?
I thought that I had initially heard a percentage. I couldn't find that this afternoon, but what I did find was that any unallocated funding, there would have to be an explanation given to HUD to explain what the circumstances were. And so if they didn't accept that as acceptable, there is a chance of losing that funding.
So,
And there is also a chance of not losing the funding, and we just don't know what that proportional risk is.
Right. And it would depend on the particular circumstances and whether that meets HUD expectations of what an unforeseen circumstance was.
so if we were to say vote for this funding for the paving, and through the process of the SLUP, only had to add a little bit and not as much as we originally thought, that then could potentially be seen as, oh, the process changed, or the determination later was that we didn't need all of this money for paving, just only a fraction of it, and that could get rolled over, versus having to explain, well, we went through this process and just had $100,000 that we just decided not to spend.
Or if during environmental review, something was uncovered that we didn't know before, there's a extensive environmental review that's required. So there may be a federal regulation. As far as we know, this isn't in a floodplain. It's not impacted by the airport overlay zone, things like that. But there may be something, I think that would be an example of something where we couldn't use it because the project couldn't go forward because of the environmental review.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Stanley.
But our decision not to allocate funding would not fall into a category of unforeseeable reasons for not spending funding.
I think it would be a harder argument to make to HUD.
Thanks.
Okay, do we have any further comments from the commission on this at this time? Seeing none, thank you, Leslie. I'm going to open it up for public comment. If anybody has any comments on this agenda item, please feel free to approach the podium.
And I'll state the rules for public comment for this evening. Please state your name and address, indicate if you're a city resident, non-city resident or city business owner. We do have a 3-minute time allotment, and when your time has elapsed, the timer will beep. And as always, we ask that our language be respectful to everyone. Thank you.
Justin Reed, 630 Cottage Drive, Apartment B, 1B, Michigan city resident. So the place where the shelter is at, MISTA will not put any money to that because it's next to a shelter, and it's also next to the city sewage plant. So MISTA will not go ahead and put money toward that at all. So if you're hoping that some housing is going to go there, guess what? It's not going to go there. And second of all, you know, I hear that there's a lot of complaints about the location of where Safe Harbor is at. The question is, is anybody working on another location in Traverse City? Probably not, because nobody wants it in Traverse City. So, I mean, whatever resistance is for this parking, for this paving, and if for some reason Safe Harbor shuts down, I mean, maybe then a township can pick it up. But until that happens, the Safe Harbor is going to be where it's at. So, and also the fact that, you know, that I'm part of that program with the with the Northwestern Michigan Supportive Housing. They're very lovely people. They do really good work. I've lived in the Commons for 14 years, and if they're asking for some help, from financial help, then I would give them the financial help. I'm an example of someone in the community. I'm going to be here probably forever just because who I am and how I like to stir the pot all the time. But I'm not going away, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. Any other public comment at this time?
Good evening. I'm Dave Petrov. I'm Interlochen resident. My partner here is Ann Rogers. She's not out in this cold weather, so you're talking about this parking lot, and I don't know how big it is and things like that. And you're talking about the possibility of generator, things like that. It would be very cool to take and instead of putting in all of that, I mean, you probably still have to have a parking lot, but could we put in solar panels? You know, screen the parking lot with solar panels, plan on putting in a battery, you know, like a power wall or something like that to do the power, so you would have reserve power, and it would be using it, and it would be an attraction for other things that, you know, if this was no longer Safe Harbor or something like that, it could be used for, you know, it'd be an attraction to a different thing. So just to look at the possibility of putting in solar panels and, you know, a battery system. Don't spend money on a generator system that we're trying to get away from that sort of stuff. So, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Any other public comment?
Hi, my name is Cindy Mylock, 411 South Oak Street, resident of Traverse City. I would just like to encourage you all, as a former volunteer at both CUMC in the kitchen on the mornings for breakfast and for Safe Harbor, I would like to say that I feel like even though the idea of having a better, greener opportunities sounds really good, I think these are such vital services that we have in this community. They need the monies now. This money has been allocated, or it's ready for it to be spent. There's a due date behind it. To Dave's comment earlier about the solar panels and stuff, that sounds like a great idea, but there's also all this opposition about temporary. We want this to move. It needs to be out of Traverse City. In my mind, it can't be out of Traverse City because this is where these people have the resources available to be in like farther away places where there's no transportation to and from easily, access to get there, to be safe at night on cold nights. It just sounds cruel and unrealistic, and I feel that I just encourage you all to say yes tonight, please, to vote this money through for the services in this community, and look forward to other opportunities in the future where you can have different outcomes or different ideas to have a greener climate, to help with the climate change and whatnot. But tonight, for this matter, I do hope that you will all say yes to this. Thanks.
Any other comments? Oh, thank you.
Hello, Mark Keeley, 822 Cass Street. Business owner here in Traverse City. I live here. I sit on the board. I'm going to say I'm here on my own capacity, private personal capacity. But I do sit on the board for the Traverse Health Clinic. I am newly elected trustee for the Board of Trustees at NMC. I also spent 5 years growing up with chronic unsheltered life. So for us, I think I'm here to say, please pass this funding. It's vital. Please vote to continue the work year-round for the shelter. Having a population that we do here without having those resources, you know, it's cold out right now, but in the summertime, there's their own challenges. I would say that we have an opportunity to have further discussion regarding the move or anything else, but taking points of, you know, hypothetical points about what might happen in the future while watching opportunities for funding to come through that are going to help right now, regardless of what's going to happen. We'll have that conversation later, but do the right thing right now, which is guaranteeing the functionality of this shelter year-round. It's very important work. Now, the mobile medical unit, it's a fantastic thing. I'm not here to speak on behalf of the Traverse Health Clinic, but I do know that having a centrally located place, as we do here in Traverse City, allows for a much more effective use of resources for not only just the mobile medical unit, but any of the resources that the clinic puts towards the homeless population. Think of the expertise that are brought to bear, the doctors, the nurses, the time, those folks being here centrally located, primarily centrally located here, based out of Munson a lot of times. Those resources will be much more limited if that, even though it's mobile, that it's going to have to travel farther outside of the city. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any last comments? Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Was there a motion made?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It was Stanley, seconded by Treadwell. Thank you for bringing that back.
And the motion, just to be completely clear, is exactly as what was recommended in the packet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll call the vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Yes, reluctantly.
Commissioner Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell,
Yes.
Commissioner Werner,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson,
Yes.
and Mayor Shamrow.
Yes, motion passes. I wanted to thank staff for getting us through that process, and I want to thank all the commissioners for giving so much feedback that I know that will go into the next, cut me off. We'll go into the next round of deliberations for the funding. Thank you for that. Moving on to new business, one that I'm very excited to see before us. It is a consideration of approving a concept request from Veterans for Peace for a piece of art that piece of work that they've been working on for a very long time. So I'm going to hand that off to you, City Manager Vogel.
Yeah, I actually wanted to turn this over to our city clerk who spoke with Mr. Keenan today, just to get some clarification on the actual proposal and some a miscommunication that we'd like to clarify.
Yes, yeah, and we'll reiterate that we're really pleased that Mr. Keenan is here to present this for your approval and concept. And I wanted to just clarify an item that was in the packet, which is a communication that's has Mr. Keenan's name on it. There was, to be very honest, a communication gap between Mr. Keenan and Ms. Hunt in our Parks and Recreation Division. So To clarify, what's before you is to approve a veterans monument in concept. It's not for any particular park. That communication had said Hall Park. There's no particular park in mind at this point. The communication also indicated that it's a wall. It's not a wall. That was a concept some time ago. It's a monument. And then it also mentioned 70 square feet, and that is also not decided at this point in time. So, and we apologize, for instance, the Record Eagle used that letter as a basis for their story. But really what's before you is to approve the concept, and that would include the waiver, the potential waiver eventually of the size requirement in our monument policy, and then also the requirement that any individual named on a monument be deceased for a minimum of 2 years, whereas this proposal contemplates honoring individuals that are still alive. And so if you approve the motion that's in your packet tonight, it's approving it in concept. It allows Mr. Keenan and the folks from Veterans for Peace to proceed in good faith with fundraising. And then that exact proposal, the more refined specifics that would come to form, including the location and the exact size, would be brought back to the Parks and Recreation Commission for their recommendation to you and require final City Commission approval. So just wanted to clarify that. And Mr. Keenan, if you have anything that you would like to say in connection with this, we want to welcome you to do that. And that's it from me.
Well, thank you. I mean, I was going to give some type of a presentation. I probably don't need to unless you want me to. I mean, I don't want to take up a whole lot of your time. I mean, the main thing is it is a monument. Do you all have did you get a copy of the monument itself? And that's we're going to try to replicate that through a sculptor or sculptors in the area. I want to keep it local. Try to get it as close to that as possible. I've already spoken to a sculptor in Williamsburg who will do the dove that's on top of that sculpt in bronze, but he was very upset when we were going to pretty powder coat it. He likes bronze. Anyway, so we're here, or I'm here, and we are here to get the approval that to proceed with this monument and start fundraising and go forth. I've been working on this project for probably close to 3 years now, and just keep getting pushed back. And I think I've got a whole lot of support in the community, and we do, and we want to move forward with your approval. And at a given point in time, I'll come back to you and show you kind of a model of what we're trying to duplicate, and also a site. And there's various sites, and could be Hall Park, it could be Sunset Park, could be the open space, any place, someplace where it's visible, because I vision there'll be lights around it, and at night it'll illuminate, and it'll be a beautiful addition to our city, and especially in these times where war rages all around the world, and we have many monuments in Traverse City that honor veterans, and rightly so, because many of them are heroes, but also people that work for peace and justice and have done that their entire lives are also heroes, just a different kind of hero, because they get lots of pushbacks. It's very difficult for them. So anyway, that's what I'm here to ask your approval. If you'd waive the size policy, and also the honoring people that are living as well as deceased. I think that's very important, because I think at the Parks and Rec meeting, a veteran, Iraq, Afghanistan vet, spoke about the importance that his children be able to speak to someone that's nominated and put on a plaque on that monument, and to find out about them and talk to them. and find out where they're coming from. And I think that is, we think that's very, very important as well. So.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Keenan or want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the city commission approve waiving the posthumous requirement for additions to the proposed memorial and waive the square footage restriction with the requirement that the final design and location come back to the Parks and Recs Commission for approval as recommended by the Parks and Recs Commission.
I think, I was going to say, I think, go ahead.
Is there a better motion?
Yeah, I think you were referring to the, another communication in there. And so the proposed motion is that the city commission approves in concept the proposed monument to be placed in a city park with the final design and location to be determined, and further, that the monument size limit and naming guidelines be waived. So substantively, I think it's essentially the same.
That's what I heard,
That's what I
Commissioner.
That's what I heard too.
That's
All
what I
right.
heard.
Sorry
I'll
for
second.
being nitpicky.
Great
but
job.
I get paid to do that.
Great job, Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
appreciate it.
I'll second that. We, as Traverse City, say that we're one of the international cities of peace, and I see this as a concrete way of recognizing that and showing the world. Not saying the monument itself has to be made of concrete.
Yes. I also want to take a moment to thank Commissioner Shaw. She, as I know Mr. Keenan is now experienced with, there's a big difference in our process between art and a monument and other types of structures or statues that might be in the city. And I know that Commissioner Shaw helped guide the group through a lot of the process as our Arts Commission representative, and I appreciate that because it's a lot to dig through, I know. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem Wilson.
And it's just my understanding that it has to be done this way, in this order, in order to keep the ball rolling, because it does seem kind of
Yes.
strange that we don't have a place to put it yet.
Yes, it does, unfortunately. Welcome, this is one of the better parts of government, right? Mitch, you have your hand up?
Yes, I should hope that this doesn't happen, but one of the reasons that the city of Traverse City and other bodies have a rule that somebody has to be dead for 2 years or some length of time before something gets named after them is to avoid the embarrassing situation if there's some scandal concerning said person after their name gets on something. So, again, hoping that doesn't happen, but would there be policies in place, or could there be, to then remove something?
That is absolutely the intention and will happen. We've talked about that, and that'll be baked into the final materials that you would be approving, is to retain that right as a city if there was a circumstance where a name should be removed.
so-
Like you said, hopefully that doesn't occur, but we need to retain that right in case
The
it
state
did.
of Michigan waived that policy for naming the Gordie Howe International Trade Crossing as the new bridge between Detroit and Windsor, Ontario. But at that point, Gordie Howe was long retired and towards the end of his life, so.
Well, and you know, what? Sometimes it takes more than 3 years for things to come out for people too. So I know that Mr. Keenan and his group and our staff will work together to come up with the best possible policy we can, as much as we can, dealing with humans as humans ourselves.
We'll
So,
hopefully, well, we not hopefully, we will have a committee of people that will take nominations for people that we're going to induct. We'll have a ceremony once a year at the monument and induct 2 to 3 people, at least one, and possibly 2 locals and 1 international or national person that has worked for peace and justice. And we'll do that every single year and put their names and honor them.
that's wonderful, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, then I'm going to open it up. Oh, did you want to?
I just wanted to make a comment, if I may. I was at the Parks Commission meeting on January 9th, and you gave a brilliant presentation. It was very moving, lots of support, and I see some of the same faces here in the room tonight. And I just want to say thank you. So this is very moving for me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll take a moment then and open this up for public comment right now, since we do have a motion before us. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Keenan.
Take a quick moment. Mac McClellan, 18-year city resident, but now at 8334 Outer Drive South. Appreciate the support of the commission, appreciate the consideration for the monument and the waiving of the policies. I just wanted to say, I pledge my personal commitment to ensure that all of the issues are addressed within the size and location and support the fundraising efforts for the project. So just wanted to express my support and other support for the project. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Judy Childs, 3221 English Woods Drive, East Bay. I've never been to one of these meetings, but I'm going to come back because I am so in love with all of you. Our national story right now is a nightmare. And so, like, my goal for myself is think global, act local. So I came, and I am so grateful for Tim and you all. And the previous Safeway, not Safeway, Safe Harbor. Wow. I mean, we need to bring our children here to see what adults that actually care about their community, what they can do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Sid Van Slyke, 6-year city resident. Now I live in Garfield Township at 3201 Silver Farms Lane. But I do earn my living right across the street from you guys here at West Shore Bank. I'm the community president. And good news for the city manager, Tuesday nights are when our cleaning crew comes, so I'll have no idea if you left a mess tomorrow when I get there. So I stand here tonight at the risk of pestering the commission because you all got an email from me. I expected to be gone tonight. Thanks to the 13 below temperature, our board decided to not have everyone travel, so I wound my board meeting up at 6 o'clock tonight and decided to come see you guys. I think you've addressed most of the issues, and if I'm a commissioner, one of my concerns is the perpetual management of this thing. I've only had, I won't recite the email you already received from me, but I've only had further conversations about broad community support at NMC. TCAPs can now be added to the list, as well as the community foundation's willingness to participate in fundraising and potentially endow some of the maintenance expenses related for the ongoing future. I think the waivers of the 2 waivers requested are very important for the scale and effect of a monument like this, and also to be able to learn from the living while they're here. But I also endorse what I call the Bill Cosby rule. He kind of ruined it for everybody, and sometimes you don't know for a few years if things have gone wrong for someone you've honored. So I think everything you're addressing is completely appropriate in my mind. There's very broad community support for the project, and I appreciate you guys' efforts and concerns and look forward to coming back, hopefully, with your support with a finalized plan. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, David Petrov once again. Myself and my not appearing partner, Ann Rogers. But anyway, thank you very much. I think we all recognize Tim Keenan is extremely valuable for this community and many ways. And this here, I hope it will go through and it'll be something very, very positive that everybody can see. And it was already addressed, the idea of names could be removed if, that have been put on, will be put on here and things like that. And also the idea of those living and things, Veterans for Peace, I would like to support other people joining and becoming part of Veterans for Peace. We've been losing a lot of them in just the last few years. We've had, some very good names, very good people. Veterans are part of it, so we hope we don't lose them so quickly, but it seems like that clock is, it's ticking faster. So anyway, please do it, and we'd like to see this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any final comment? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. So we look forward to seeing what that'll result in and bringing it back. We're glad that process can continue. All right, the next item is consideration of approving the 2025 performance evaluation process for the city manager and city attorney. That's myself and Mayor Pro Tem Wilson. I think everybody on the commission's now gone through this from last year. This is just us kind of laying out the annual review process. Last year, and we had talked about previously, there have been discussions of doing a 360 review at some point, and we said, 6 months into a new city manager's term might not be the best time, but here we are a year and a half so later, into the term, a year later from when we did it last time. And so we are proposing a 360 review. That means all department heads as well as DDA and TCLP will be interviewed. And other than that, the process will be pretty similar to what we're all used to, kind of looking at the questions ahead of time and then having our sit-downs. Commissioner Stanley, you have your hand up.
So, point of clarification on the process, is this the same firm that the city has used in previous years?
No, and I just realized that had gotten left out, didn't it? No, they were not available. Woody Smith has done it the last couple of years. He is not available this year to do it. So we are going to be, is there an official firm name or?
It's engaging Becky Ewing
Yes.
is the proposal that you had.
Was there an RFP for these services?
No, there hasn't. In the past, it's really been more of a direct ask because it's so nuanced, if you will. And so Mr. Smith, who was unavailable and indicated that he's not available really going forward, shared that fairly recently. And so we worked to find somebody who's capable in this area of leadership development and active listening. And so that's why that is the recommendation from the mayor and the mayor pro tem, which is provided for in the process that's been adopted previously.
Thank you for the clarification.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead, Jackie.
I'm delighted that you're able to incorporate a 360 element in this. I wondered if there was any discussion about the possibility of expanding the 360 aspect beyond department heads.
Well, it's expanded beyond department heads to being just the TCLP and the DDA. Usually and just, this is for public, I know you know this, we usually do 2 to 3, or usually 3 department heads. So a selection every year. This year it'll be all department heads as well as the TCLP and DDA. That was what had been suggested in the past when we had discussed a 360 for the scope and the timing of the review process. If you're thinking of a bigger one as such as like community stakeholders involvement, that might be something we'd have to RFP for down the line, but this was a kind of a bigger expanded look. So go ahead, sir.
I really was interested in hearing from all layers of the staff organization. And understanding that one-on-one interviews just aren't feasible from a time and cost standpoint. Are there any other ways to open up for feedback beyond department heads?
I would say not in this process and this timing we have this year. That would be a good consideration for a future expanded look.
When are we interviewing?
We interview in April usually, but then there's some meetings ahead of time. There's questions that are proposed to everybody, as we know, and then the interview process starts. This, I think if we were going to do it, as your point is, one-on-ones are not possible. That would involve probably creating a link or a digital survey of some kind and
Anonymous survey tool of some kind.
yes, and some other questioning that may or may not be the same. Typically where we've used this as is department heads reflecting what they've been hearing from their staff, so they're kind of the direct reports to them, and that is their direct reporting to us. I would say that's both for positive and negative reasons. Just across the board in the past, we've always been able to get good and bad feedback from department heads. This will just allow us to expand it to all of the department heads at once. So,
Just let me register, more is better when it comes to feedback.
appreciate that. That's a good point to make for the future. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, I don't think there's a motion in your packet, but there should have been one. And if you're willing to make it, that is that the city commission approves the 2025 performance evaluation process for the city manager and city attorney is included with the packet materials for the January 21, 2025 meeting of the city commission. So that's the proposed motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Warner.
Support.
Thank you, Commissioner Stanley. Was there further discussion on this? I do appreciate the feedback, Commissioner Anderson, and would be built into a future one. I appreciate that. Any other public comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. And we'll get that rolling for everybody. Next, we have appointments going on to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And this looks like it was an ad hoc with Commissioner Warner, Anderson, and Shaw. And I do not see who was the chair, so if somebody wants to speak up.
I may have been.
Okay.
Was I?
I know how that goes sometimes.
I think you were the chair.
I think
Okay.
you were.
Okay.
Or I'll speak up. Yeah, and I feel like we say this frequently because it's true, is we had excellent applicants. I think we had 4 applicants, 3 spots, and a variation. You'll see that, one's an alternate, one is a slightly shorter term than the other term, but all excellent folks that applied, and a diverse group of people that applied, which is fantastic too. Is anything else to offer from folks? All right, I'll make the motion that Kyle Norman be appointed to the term expiring June 30th, 2026, Mary Mills for appointment to the term expiring June 30th, 2027, and Paul Wilkins as an alternate for the term expiring June 30th, 2027, seats previously held by Teresa Broad, Jenny Sharp, and Matt Hanley on the Board of Zoning Appeals as recommended by the ad hoc committee consisting of Commissioner Werner, Commissioner Anderson, and Commissioner Shaw.
Support.
Thank you for that. Any other comments on that? Any public comment on this? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Shaw,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell,
No.
Commissioner Werner,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson,
Yes.
and Mayor Shamrow.
Yes, motion passes. Okay, we're going to now go to the City Planning Commission appointments. This was Mayor Pro Tem Wilson, Commissioner Anderson, and Commissioner Stanley. I believe Mayor Pro Tem Wilson, you were the chair?
Yes, this is a mayoral appointment, but as pro tem, I served on this ad hoc, and the committee met, and there were several qualified applicants. Although there was a split vote by majority ruling, the recommendation is that Anna DeTuri, Debbie Hershey be reappointed to a 3-year term expiring October 4th, 2027 on the City Planning Commission, and I would like to make that motion.
Go right ahead. And
Oh,
finish
read it
off
again?
with the,
Okay,
as,
that-
on the City Planning Commission as recommended by
that
the
in-
ad hoc?
Yeah.
As of
Do
Mayor
you
Pro
want me to
Tem
read it
Wilson.
all again?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just adding the last part of the consisting of Mayor Pro Tem Wilson, Commissioner Anderson, and Commissioner Stanley.
I think that does it.
Support.
Okay, and just really quickly, I wanted to add that this was when we were going through some major ad hoc appointments, this was assigned to this ad hoc. It usually would have me as the mayor sitting on it. When we made that discovery but realized the Mayor Pro Tem was on it, I basically entrusted him / empowered him and the ad hoc to put forth the recommendations. So I was not involved in the process this time, but kind of with my blessing, and we've done that in the past for different reasons. So just wanted to clarify that that wasn't a intentional handoff, but it also didn't need to go back and be redrawn for that reason. So other comments on this? Go ahead, Heather.
Well, I have a comment on the Planning Commission
Mhm.
composition. On their January 7th regular meeting, there was a discussion of the board composition, and specifically, it entailed reducing the city commission representation there from 2 members to 1 member in order to bring on an outside ex officio. That conversation got enough board interest that it is coming back to a study session, I believe, maybe tomorrow, because there's a study session. But I feel that the city commission actually needs more representation, not less. And I don't mean that we need another commissioner on the city commission, but that we need to know, we need to be better informed of what's going on at the planning commission. Maybe everybody watches the meetings, and if you do, then I withdraw my request. But my request is that we we have a dedicated agenda item for these important boards that just a couple of sentences, what's going on? You may not be aware that tomorrow they're discussing the R2 district and adding right now you're allowed to have 2 dwellings on a parcel. They're talking about adding 4. I mean, that's a pretty big discussion. It came up in the big upzone last year, year before, but it never passed. The 2 commissioners that are currently serving on the Planning Commission represent very different constituencies here in the city and different ideas about how the city should grow. And removing one of those commissioners, one or the other, to add in an ex officio from like Garfield, which was one of the suggestions, reduces citizen representation by half. So yes, ultimately, any zoning changes will come to the city commission, but these two voices and 2 perspectives that we have now help inform the city commission of the reasoning behind the planning commission's recommendations. And these voices and perspectives would be even more informative if we heard from them more often. So I have asked a few times over the last year to have an agenda item for board comments added at the end, and I'm doing it again.
Well-
Just if I may, I'm sorry, Mayor,
No,
after you.
I was just going to say that Commissioner Anderson brought this up in agenda review, and I think it was brought up in a passing comment of way, but that's typically the end comments from commissioners have been where they can bring up things that are of note on any committees they are on. I know Commissioner Warner's brought it up for TCLP in the past. We can re-emphasize that. People can also submit, written reports. We also have Bay Brief and other things. So I will be better to ask that when I'm asking for final comments, as well as reminding people of comments or updates. But we also, I'd love to hear more about what's, if this is what we're going on, that can be shared for Arts Commission too, or TCLP, or planning.
That's exactly right.
And so, but also we aren't going to call on people if there's not options, not things that need to be updated. So we will leave that to the commissioners for the final comment, but that is a good point to raise, and that is how we can do that. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if this is directly on point, Commissioner Shaw, but just to share one standing item that's on your regular meeting agenda, including tonight, though it hasn't been done for a while, is reports and correspondence from other city officials, boards, and committees, as well as item 2 under reports, which is where historically, but not more recently, commissioners, when they have something to share, to report out from the board that they serve as a liaison, can do that verbally. So that's there, and maybe we look at returning to actually announcing that item.
That's fair. I can pause
at
and
the
do
very
that.
end.
I was going to say, I've been on the commission for almost 10 years. That's never happened, but that's a good historical note, why I'm glad we have Benjamin, and we can do that going forward
Oh,
then.
thank you. At the Planning Commission, they used to do it, it didn't happen, maybe once a month. Does the BZA have anything to report? Sometimes there's nothing to report, but it was always there just in case. Like the TCLP solar panel initiative, where citizens can put solar panels on their homes and feed that into the grid and use that energy. I didn't find out about that until it was reported in the paper, and it would have been nice just to get a couple of sentences.
Nope, that's a great comment, and you brought up a good discussion point that we will do the reports and announcements in the future.
Great.
So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Was there any other comments on this item? Go ahead, Jackie.
Just an early warning, given that I was bold enough to speak up in agenda review, I do have just a brief highlights report for Planning Commission.
Okay,
tonight.
I will let you report on that then. Thank you. I'm excited to hear it. All right, any other comments on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, any public comment on this agenda item?
Justin Reed. I just want to thank the ad hoc committee for their due diligence. I did read the reasonings, and I think those reasonings are pretty sound. Like I said, I thank you for your time, and Also, if we're thinking about adding a ex officio to these committees, it has to be in Traverse City, it cannot be Garfield Township as a different municipality. So if we're making decisions in Traverse City for anything that has to deal with our community, it needs to be a Traverse City resident. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Any other comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you for that. Moving on to reports and announcements and correspondence. Does anybody have anything they'd like to report? Go ahead, Jack.
Why, yes. This is just a recap of some topics that began discussion earlier in the Planning Commission and are going to be addressed again tomorrow night. So it's must-see TV. We will be discussing increasing allowable density in R2 zoned neighborhoods from 2 dwelling units to 4 dwelling units per parcel. This proposal last came to the City Commission in October 2023, and no motion was made for action. It impacts portions of Traverse Heights, Boardman, Oak Park, Kids Creek, and Central neighborhoods. And the action step would be to schedule a public hearing in March, early March. We'll be talking about Planning Commission goals for 2025, not only the R2 issue, but also making progress on the riparian buffer ordinance, which is a draft is expected to come to the full Planning Commission in March of 2025. The short-term rental ordinance refinement is on our discussion agenda. I believe the Planning Commission is coming at it from the standpoint of zoning ordinances and land use and pursuing what's being called an appropriate cap for short-term rentals in all commercial zoning districts. I have also requested a City Commission study session to talk about other types of ordinances that we might use to complement any zoning ordinances regarding short-term rentals. And then the bylaw changes that were discussed are indeed to reduce the total number of planning commissioners from 9 to 7 and reduce the number of city commissioners sitting on the planning commission from 2 to 1. The discussion began on January 7th and is going to continue tomorrow. And just a note that any action would require city commission approval because it's governed by a city ordinance.
Yes, thank you for that. I was going to actually ask if we had that, if we had the knowledge that I thought even though it was a change to that board, it had to come to us. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes, the mayor started this meeting with a proclamation honoring the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. Yesterday, I attended the city of St. Ignace's inaugural Martin Luther King Day March because I thought it was important to show some solidarity with a community that might be smaller, but actually is more racially diverse than us. And they, despite very cold temperatures, had a successful event that a fair slice of the community attended, and then we had a fabulous community coffee hour afterwards.
Fantastic. Thanks for doing that in another community. Any other shares? I guess this kind of, we've gone into a little bit of reports / final comments. So any other reports I should ask? Okay, thank you all. And so now I will open up to final general public comment. So this can be on anything, not just what was covered tonight.
So what I gave Benjamin is the MUTCD. This has to deal with the Griffin Street project. Now, in the MUTCD, it's introductory for the first portion of it, and the very back of it says what the green color lines are for. The Griffin Street project, the green lines are for high visibility, since it is crossing a very busy Union Street. And there is one thing that I noticed I was missing with that diagram is especially on Union Street, trail exiting from both sides. So in addition to the paint, it would be a nice recommendation for a trail exiting sign with the symbol of the walking and the bicycle, just like they have on where the trail crosses there off from 14th Street. So when you're going over by those condominiums, you have the small sign that says ahead, and then you actually have the trail exiting sign just after that. So maybe that can be something that can be looked into, part of this Griffin Street reconstruction with the little bike trail that's supposed to go behind the Speedway. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other general public comment tonight? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Any final comments from commissioners? Not reports. Had a very good active meeting on that. Much appreciated. All right, everybody, with that, we will adjourn for the night. Have a great evening and stay warm. Good timing on that.
Houston.